Hi, my name is Cindy, and I am helping some women make masks for our medical personnel. We're making two different types of masks. We have this one, which is called the Foo mask, and we have the typical folded mask like this. The other day we ran into a problem in that we ran out of elastic. Both groups ran out of elastic and we can't get it. It's been on back order. And one of the gals asked if I could make some straps, and I agreed that yes, I could make straps. The idea of folding and sewing fabric, thin tubes of fabric, and then turning them wasn't something I really wanted to do, but for the cause I was willing to do it. Then I recalled that my Singer Featherweights come with a bias binding foot, and so I began to experiment about using that bias binding foot to actually make a strap for the masks. I have a number of Singer Featherweights, and they came with two different types of bias binding feet. I've been using one like this. This attaches to your post for your presser feet. Your fabric feeds through this end, goes underneath to the needle, and it gets sewn. This cone-shaped piece folds the fabric in and then in again so that it folds it like a double fold bias tape, and then you're just sewing it together. This is another type of bias binding foot. It does not have the pins to hold the fabric, but I found out that I struggled with using the pins, so this would work just as well if you happen to have that. So this is the technique that I used. My first challenge was how to feed a strip of fabric into the bias binding foot. The Singer manual that came with my machines, this one is actually Shirley. Shirley is a 1950 model. She's older than I am, and she sews wonderfully. But the first thing I found is if I trim the strap, make a little bit of a point, and then use a needle and thread with a knot on the end of the thread. I take one little stitch just to secure it, and I'm using a 30 weight thread to give it a little bit of to be a little bit stronger. But if I take the thread and put it through the groove of the presser foot, then I can gently pull the fabric through the cone until it's underneath the needle. Once it's under the needle, I can begin to sew. Be sure that you put your presser foot down when you're working with the bias binding foot. It often doesn't look like the presser foot is up, and I've caught myself a couple times. Once you're underneath there, you just begin sewing, and I like to put my finger here. It helps hold the fabric so that it folds nicely. I don't put much pressure on it. It feeds itself, and you end up with a nice strap. As I said, I found out I didn't need to use bias. I could just use straight cut, and I found that if I used a fat quarter and used the 18-inch length, those straps are great if you're sewing the straps onto your mask. If you're going to use a mask similar to this one where the straps go through the side, then you may want to use a whole width of fabric. You can also use the width of fabric and cut it into two pieces for regular masks. Another thing that I found to eliminate the need to thread a needle and pull the thread through, I discovered that if I used a little bit of a glue stick and put a dab of glue on the end of my fabric, I could attach another piece of fabric to that. I ended up doing long strips that way, and then I would start sewing. And the glue part will go through, sometimes needing a little bit of a tug on the end, but it will go through and you can just keep on sewing, making yards and yards and yards of straps for masks for our medical personnel. The other thing that I discovered, the instructions say that this fabric should be 15/16 of an inch. And I began to wonder, I cut them 15/16 of an inch, but I began to wonder, well, what about 1 inch? It's not that big a difference. And I discovered that it would work just fine with 1 inch, and I was able to use my June Taylor shape cut ruler. If you have a Stripology ruler by Gudrun, that would also work as well. All you need to do is make 1-inch strips. Let's see what other notes that I have, what else I have learned from this. You could use a strip from a jelly roll and cut it into 1-inch strips, so you would get 2 width of fabric, 1-inch strips out of each jelly roll fabric. That would provide 4 straps for a regular mask where you're sewing them on, or it would be the 2 straps if you're feeding the straps through the sides. The bias foot is adjustable. If you are sewing, sometimes the stitching will perhaps be too close to the edge and you won't be catching the fold. If that happens, you can slide the foot by pushing from side to side to get the stitching in the position that you need. If you're using this type of presser foot, it has an adjustment screw. You loosen the adjustment screw and this whole bottom plate can move back and forth, and then you tighten it when it's in the position that you want to have it in to put your stitching in the best position. So that's about it. It's been great for our sewing group. I'm able to crank out a lot of straps in a fairly short period of time. Whole lot better than trying to sew them and turn them. Thank you and have a great day.